When I see guys have their Grey Cup rings, Super Bowl rings, Stanley Cup rings stolen out of their cars, do you want me to name them?
Why are they
Matt
in the
Dominguez,
car?
looking at you. Corey Banks. I'm like, what are you guys doing? But they haven't been robbed yet until they do.
Yeah.
Anyways, let's go to the coffee cup right now. Tim Hortons Field in Hamilton, where there is no crime. Marshall Ferguson joining us, the voice of the TiCats. How you doing, Marsh?
I'm good. Yeah, I try to limit it to at least, I would say, less than 100,000 in the car. One time, I had 50,000 stolen out of there, and I just kind of shrugged it off and moved on. So it's all it happens.
Do you have a story of a car break-in at all in Hamilton or somewhere else?
Only one I've ever had was actually I was covering the 2015 East-West Bowl when I was at Percival Molson Stadium at McGill University, and my dad drove down from Kingston, where I'm from, to come and just basically watch the game because honestly, I was done playing at that point. I think he just wanted to go watch a university football game. So he came to Montreal and he was in the crowd and he was taking all these shots because he works in media as well. So he's kind of working his photography and all these different things. And we went back to the car, and right next to Percival Molson, right on the side of the hill, you know where it is there, Roddy, the back window of his car was just smashed out. And we just walked up to the car and it was a pouring rainstorm. And we were like, really? And we looked inside, the glass was all over it, and they had stolen a bunch of his camera equipment, which was actually decently expensive stuff. But so we drove home with the window down. He didn't talk the whole 2 hours all the way home. He was furious. And then we ended up getting home, and he called insurance, and we dealt with all that. But man, A-Rod, 500,000, like we actually talked about it on my show in Hamilton this morning. What the hell do you keep in your car that's worth 500,000? Like I'd have a hard time enough time accruing enough goods that I could get to $500,000.
I would guess a couple World Series rings, perhaps. I have no idea. But and by the way, there are some rough areas of Montreal. I'll tell that story. That is a rough area of Montreal. I'll tell that story later. Marshall, nobody voted for BC Hamilton to be Canada's Game of the Week in our poll last week, and it turned out it was. What a thrill a minute at Tim Hortons Field on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, that was a fun one. It was one of those kind of classic CFL games where I'm kind of laughing because I'm standing in the play-by-play booth, and with about 4 minutes left, I didn't see an exodus. It wasn't like the Miami Heat fans when they thought they were going to lose the championship to the San Antonio Spurs, and everybody starts scattering for the exits, and then they're banging on the doors trying to get back in. But there was kind of this like slow, I would say almost like a mosh pit of people. You could kind of see people slowly standing up and starting to shift towards the exits. And we go to the 3-minute warning. I looked at my color guy, Mike Morielli, and I said, don't do that. Like, this thing is never over. And especially when you deal with a return game like the TiCats have this season, where at any point they can flip field position on you. And I just felt like that was a game, in all honesty, they probably should not have won, because I genuinely think that BC was the better team for the majority of it. But it's the CFL, as you guys know, and I just feel like at that point in the game, anything could have happened, and sure enough, it did. They got a big return. They got 2 shot plays to the end zone to Brandon Banks. One of them cashed in. It stood, which we were honestly a little bit surprised by, the Brandon Banks catch that actually stood as the winning touchdown, because we couldn't tell the difference, but I guess when it's called a touchdown on the field, it has to be clear and obvious evidence that it was not actually a completed pass for the touchdown that ended up winning the thing. So it was a bundle of fun. It was great. It was First Responders Night. It was the Hall of Fame game, which always has a bit of a different vibe here in Hamilton on that night. So all in all, a really exciting time for everybody involved. But man, I saw Matthew Shinetti's interview with Mike Riley in the BC locker room afterwards, and it wasn't just the ankle injury, it was just the general tone of the room. I've played on an 0-8 football team before when I was in junior varsity playing Ontario Varsity Football League for the Limestone Grenadiers, and we were trash, and we went 0-8, and I threw 20 interceptions over 8 games. And I just remember that feeling of just like, you feel like you can't get anything right, even when you get things right, even when there's a flicker of hope, like a big long Brian Burnham 47-yard touchdown, or when there's a shot play to the end zone, or John White walks into the end zone because the blocking is so great up front on a running play. You just shoot yourself in the foot with a big return here and then a touchdown there, and then you go back and you get on the team bus and you're like, how the hell did we lose that game? It doesn't make any sense. So BC certainly dug themselves into a hell of a hole here.
Marshall, it's a fellow Marshall, by the way. I love your first name. So,
yes, Marshall, good to see you. Always wanted to say that.
Yeah. As I watched that game, 2 things stood out for me is what an impact Brandon Banks has on that football team, because it was just a week prior that they were playing against the Saskatchewan Roughriders, and we were saying on this program that you're sure catching the Hamilton TiCats at the right time when they're playing without Simone Lawrence. Big inspiration on defense. Brandon Banks, huge inspiration on both offense and special teams, and you're playing without Mazzoli and Dane Evans' first game. But this game, fast forward a whole week, Brandon Banks' back has a tremendous impact on that game. And all the Hamilton Tiger Cat fans, and I'm finally getting to my question, they got to feel a lot more comfortable about Zane Evans today than they did when Mazzoli first got hurt.
Yeah, for sure. And I think with time, TiCats fans, and I've said this since the unfortunate switch had to be made at quarterback with Mazzoli going down with the season-ending ACL, but I've seen enough from Dane Evans through his 2 years, really 2.5, 3, if you want to count kind of his early days in spring camp and all that kind of stuff. But it's something I think I told you guys when I was on last time when I was out there in Saskatchewan, which is like he's so consistent in his delivery. His pocket movement always makes sense. He's never out of control. He's always within the box, as you like to say, as a quarterback, where the ball is always within the shoulders and the release is quick and it always comes off the shoulder. And there's just a lot of little quarterbacky type things that make a lot of sense. Now, I'll say this, like, I love the way that he looks. The production for Cody Fajardo in Saskatchewan is actually considerably better so far in terms of being able to come in. I know Fajardo's had an extra 6 to 8 games, whatever it is now, but like for me, Cody Fajardo does a lot of things kind of untraditionally, like his release and his footwork and his timing. And sometimes it comes out a little bit like a sidearm thing that almost looks like Phillip Rivers to me at times. But Fajardo just gets it done. To me, I look at Evans, I'm like, oh, he's got every tool to be able to make this situation work, and not just work, but have success. And yet I think people are going to fall in love with it. I think there's going to be a lot of success in the offense. I see all the ingredients of it, but it just has to keep snowballing. And I think you have to kind of piece together more than the back end of a third quarter and the start of a fourth, or the back end of a fourth quarter, because you guys know when you were there in Saskatchewan and got a chance to see him live, like it comes out of his hand nice, right? Like when he gets into it and when he gets into a rhythm like he did back end of the third quarter, start of the fourth in Regina, he feels like he's a real CFL quarterback. Like he's a next generation after Bo Levi, after Mike Riley, up and coming type of guy. But then there's stretches of the game where it just goes cold. And I think that's natural for a younger player. But I would love to see him put together a game where he breaks 400 yards passing, where he completes 75 to 80% of his passes, because I think he's got that in him. I don't know when it's going to come, but I know he's got all the tools to be able to make that happen. So again, with time, I think Hamilton fans and really CFL fans that are looking for the next generation of CFL quarterbacks will come to love and appreciate him, because he signed a 3-year contract. So I don't know what that means for Hamilton moving forwards, or whether he becomes a very appealing piece to other teams around the CFL in the offseason, depending on free agency and player movement. But I mean, conceivably, he's under contract, but via trade, if a team really wanted him, they could really try to sweep the TiCats off their feet if he shows out well for the remainder of the season.
Yeah, sorry, you got to follow.
What I was just going to say is what I saw a noticeable difference between the game against Saskatchewan versus the game against BC was a level of confidence, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but a level of cockiness that wasn't there in the Saskatchewan game. And I saw buy-in from his linemen and his offensive receivers, and you could just see that they had confidence in him. And I didn't see that in Saskatchewan, but I certainly saw that in the game against BC.
Yeah, and I would also say, just to add on to that, that I think sometimes when you go into your first career start and you're doing it in that environment in Saskatchewan, which is special and different, as we all know, that you almost try to fake it to kind of convince yourself. Like I've been there. My first start as a backup quarterback going in for a suspended starting quarterback at McMaster University was at Windsor. And again, at Windsor is not, it's not Mosaic. It's not playing in front of fans like that, but it was a road game. And we were driving a long way on a team bus with the guys. Everybody's kind of giving you the look, like, is this guy going to be for real? Or like, how is this going to, and you basically have to fake it until you make it, right? And I think in that game, Saskatchewan, what you're talking about there, Marshall, is he was trying to fake it. He was trying to convince himself. In the BC game, he meant it and he showed it. And I think that's the difference, is you could totally tell it was a different vibe in the huddle. What I'm really excited about is the Tiger Cats' next 2 games, the CFL and TSN, are live mic games. So if you want to learn something about Dane Evans and how he handles himself in the huddle, how he communicates, my favorite thing about the live mic is that the guys who really know the offense, when you break the huddle, they'll break the huddle and go, rebel right, WZ cross, X bomber, blah, blah, and they make the call, and then they go ready break, and everybody walks out, and they'll add that little tidbit at the back end of it where they'll look over and grab the running back, Cameron Marshall, and say, hey, Mac DeWill, or hey, they'll go, hey, Tasker, you're live, or hey, look for it, or like they'll give that little signal as they're leaving the huddle. I'm really excited to see, now that we get the mic on him, the next 2 games, Ottawa this Saturday, in BC the following Saturday, what he does to interact with all of his teammates.
That's interesting. And we were talking about this after Mazzoli went down. I mean, with the Tiger Cats being a Grey Cup contender and having the lead they have in the East, there's no rush. You've got some time to figure it out to see if he's going to be the guy to lead you to a Grey Cup. But every other piece is there. So is it still a patience thing to see if he's going to keep evolving, if the snowball's going to keep rolling down the hill, to see if he's a guy to lead to the Grey Cup, or do you think they're fully committed to him for the year?
I think they're in, honestly. I really do, Darren. I don't know what they would want other than him at this point. You can bring in people, and this is, honestly, it's the same conversation that I had with my co-host Kyle Mello on TSN 1150 in Hamilton about Winnipeg, because Kyle is constantly like, if Matt Nichols doesn't get this done, and then Nichols has got to be out of there, and this is the last chance Nichols is getting, and if he doesn't look right, or if he acts like he doesn't really, can't produce by himself, he's got to be out of there, and maybe O'Shea's got to be gone. I'm like, Kyle, who else do you want? Like, you can get rid of people, but you have to bring in people that are better. Like, it's not addition by subtraction. It has to be addition by addition. And so I feel like right now the quarterbacking room of the TiCats is kind of like that, where, okay, take out Nichols. Who do you want? You want to go and get somebody younger that has less CFL experience? You want to go get an NFL name and hope they learn the CFL game? Do you want to get an up-and-coming negotiation list player and hope they figure it out on the fly? Like, no. Like, Winnipeg is best with Matt Nichols doing what he does in that offense. And I think for Hamilton right now, they've invested in Dane Evans. They believe in him. The quarterbacking room, Hayden Moore behind him is from the University of Cincinnati. Sounds like a younger Zach Pillaros playing in Hamilton from Cincinnati. But the idea of him being in here, he's not ready. He's young. He's talented. He's got a good arm. Not ready. David Watford, very talented, can sling it. Does he know the full offense yet? I don't think so. Is he ready to go in and be the starting quarterback for the TiCats? I don't think anytime soon, right? He's got a different skill set. So Dane Evans is the best quarterback in this room, and that's why they signed him to the 3-year deal. That's why they immediately made him the backup quarterback. That's why it made Manziel expendable last year, because they could see his development kind of coming. And now I get an opportunity to watch him every day at practice like I am right now, and it keeps developing and getting better and better. And he's figuring out Tommy Condell. They're starting to learn each other, I think, and get more comfortable as well. So, yeah, I think they're fully invested at this point. I really do.
Marshall, lastly, before we let you get back to practice, Clark has just prodded me to ask you. We have an option on our sports trip. We're taking our viewers to Houston for Texans Broncos in the NFL. And now the NBA schedule came out yesterday. We got Houston Rockets versus Phoenix Suns, or Houston Rockets versus Sacramento Kings. You got to vote. Who would you rather see?
You know what? I would rather see Phoenix, just because I think DeAndre Ayton is a freaky body. Like, he's just, I love a lot of NBA stuff, as you guys know, and it's, to me, there's not many Joel Embiid type bodies out there that are big men that can stretch the floor, that can shoot, that can run, that can do so much. It's almost like the cheat code that Gronk was in the NFL, where you just get size, speed, athleticism, and you look at it, you're like, that's not okay. Like, that's an extraterrestrial running around playing a sport. So I think that Ayton's probably that guy. And Phoenix is kind of a fun up-and-coming team. They've made a lot of decisions to shoot themselves in the foot the last little while. But, yeah, that's a hell of a trip you guys have got lined up. I'll say that. If the Broncos can get any quarterback play whatsoever, then that's a fun one. And the Texans, I mean, if they can do anything, it's kind of like, honestly, watching the BC Lions. The only thing that can derail the Houston Texans from challenging, I think, for that division against Indianapolis is whether or not they can protect their quarterback. Because Deshaun Watson, with a clean pocket, is as good as anybody in the NFL that's up and coming right now as a young passer that's athletic. But if you don't keep him clean, he is bad. Like, he's basically Marcus Mariota, where every single week, before the week even starts, you might as well just list him as questionable to return, because when he gets banged up, you never know what's going to happen.
From the Titans fan in the room.
You're killing me.
Predicting a long year.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's a reality. At the start of the season, right, you could be 3 months out from the Titans Week 1 matchup, and they might as well list Mariota as questionable to return. And Tannehill, same.
I know.
Marshall, if they ever give you holidays, we'd love to have you come on that trip. And thanks for your time today, and thanks for your support of the program. We appreciate it.
Anytime, guys. Thanks for having me.
You're watching Rod Pedersen On Demand. For more of The Rod Pedersen Show, visit rodpedersen.com or follow Rod Pedersen on social media.